All right, welcome everybody to a brand new Poker Player podcast. I'm your host, Andreas Fröhlich, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about live poker, high stakes poker, because today's guest has been in the industry for over 13 years. He's been coming up in the mid 2000s and then playing high stakes poker, I think 2 years later already. Welcome, Alec Torelli, to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Andreas.
So the first question I always have to people that come here on the show is, how did you get into poker? And I think in your case, in the mid 2000s, how do you come up in poker to the high stakes so quickly?
Yeah, well, so I guess a two-part question. I got into poker sort of serendipitously. I was at a very formidable age in adolescence, right in 2003 when Moneymaker just won the main event. And I was invited to a friend's house to play poker because it was on television and poker was actually cool now. And so, I was never like huge into sports in high school. I was in musical theater. And so uh, it was cool to be able to play something that like all of the cool kids wanted to play and compete at. And so I was really excited about playing poker because I played with my family when I was a kid. And so I thought I was really good because I was like, oh, I've played poker before. I'm going to be, rock star, right? So I show up and I win my first time playing. And I win $12. And as they say of any any gambler, the worst thing that can happen is you win your first time playing because then you're hooked. So I was like super hooked on poker because not only did I win money, which for a 16-year-old was incredible, but also like I beat my friends, and I thought I was so good because you can easily delude yourself when you don't know anything about long term or variance or luck that you're like, oh, I won, so that means I'm good. I'm better than everyone, right? So we played all night, and there was two people left, and it was me and this one other guy. So I'm like, I must be one of the best players. So needless to say, I was hooked at poker, and I consumed every piece of content I could, which in 2003 was basically like Super System, Play Poker Like the Pros, Theory of Poker, old school poker books. And I talked poker with another guy. His name is Ryan, who came up with my high school, who became the best player in the school. He was always the best one. And so I got to talk poker with him, and he always made me better and challenged me in a lot of ways. When I was 18, I put money online, and I would play tournaments and cash games in high school. And I did pretty well. Like I had periods of high school where I would win, a couple $1,000s, or I won a tournament for like 2 or 3 grand when I was in high school. And I got first place with 30 people. So that was huge for me. It was like an insane amount of money being in high school and winning this. So I never got a job. I just kept using poker to, pay for excess things I wanted to buy or just building my bankroll. And I slowly just built up. I would play 25-cent, 50-cent, and or whatever the games were running then, and then 50-cent dollar and dollar $2. I had a week in high school where I won 3 grand playing 1-2, which was another like life-changing week for me. I had like this goal that I was going to focus all my energy on poker this one week and just kind of like neglect schoolwork a little bit. And I crushed the games that week. And so I just kind of like never looked back. I got, like I ran well at the right times to like win and build my bankroll. And then I like studied a lot and thought about poker all the time. My life was basically poker from when I was 16. Like I was always a straight A student. I was in clubs. I was like involved in theater and all these other extracurriculars. But when I found poker, I actually had a business I was running at the time called Doormat Delivery, where I would take flyers, physical flyers, and deliver them to people's doorsteps. And so I was like delivering flyers on weekends to people's doorsteps, but then like I would have other people that would deliver flyers for me, and I would just negotiate the business between like the painter, the roofer, the real estate company, and my friends who were delivering flyers. And so I was making money doing that, and that was like supporting me. I never had an allowance or anything with that. But when I found poker, I just kind of like dropped everything. And my last year of high school, I started getting like B's, and I think I got like 1C or something, which was like, tragic. But I was all in. And then in college, my first semester, let's see, I did well in some tournaments online, and I dropped out after like 3 months. And I remember thinking one day, like, I was at SMU. I had a partial scholarship there. It was a great school. I was like, it was I really wanted to go there. I wanted to study business. It was my number one choice. But I was so consumed with poker, and I got to this fork in the road where like my grades were suffering. Like I didn't even know where my economics class was. I never went because it was early in the morning on Mondays, and I was always up late Sunday night playing tournaments or something like that, where it was like conflicting with poker. And I was basically always choosing poker over school. And I got to this point where I realized like I'm either going to have to, like, it's midway through the semester, and like I'm going to have to face, my grades at some point where like my parents are going to be like, why are you have all C's and like all this stuff, and I'm either going to have to drop poker for the next 3 months and go all in on school, or go all in on school. I'll go all in on poker and just drop out of school to get to where I want to be, right? Like I'm at this plateau and I can't really break through to that next level. And I remember looking around at all these other people like scurrying off to class, and they were all like stressed and like, studying and focused. And I was like sitting there at the fitness facility at SMU with a printout of the poker hands that I had played on Party Poker. And I was like highlighting different mistakes I was making and studying them. We didn't have all these programs today, and I didn't have people to talk to. So I was just like going through the hands.
Sure.
And I remember deciding in that moment, I was like, you know what? Like the worst thing that could happen is I'm 19 and I go back to college and I'm a year older than all these other people, right? Like they have a year on me. But the best thing that could happen is like I make it and I make enough money that I can, live my dream of traveling around the world to different places and have poker pay for it. I wasn't trying to like make millions of dollars playing poker. I was just trying to like live a cool lifestyle and see the world and have poker pay for it, and maybe make a final table, win a tournament or something. And so in that moment, I decided to drop out of school. And that's when I really started to take poker a lot like more seriously, because I started to take myself more seriously. And good results happened from then. I could then go all in on poker. And, I had breaks along the way where I got like final tables. I won like 10 or 20K here and there in tournaments. And I was beating 2-4, 5-10 NL online. So I had a pretty decent bankroll. But the real break, like the first like big time I got put on the poker map was when I went to Australia and I was 19 and I played the biggest tournament in online history at the time, which was the F-Tops back on Full Tilt. And it was, the Sunday Million basically on Full Tilt, which was the biggest site at the time. And I got first for a little over $250,000. And so that immediately allowed me to play, 10-20 and 25-50. And that year in 2007, I went on to make over $1 million on Full Tilt playing high stakes cash games. And I was 18, turning 19 that year. So that was really like a huge breakout year for me. It was a combination of, getting lucky in that tournament and then leveraging that and working really hard to beat the nosebleed stakes that year. And then, I was on my way at a very young age.
What I also saw is that you mentioned that after you managed that like so many other poker players, you said you got a little bit lucky in a tournament, and then you managed to obviously play a lot higher, but also you had more more things on your road that basically could have also then gone the other way. It wasn't then just the easy way up, but that you also had then periods where you lost a lot or a very high percentage of your bankroll after that, and you had to play lower again. Like, how was that experience? Like, did you because a lot of people, their scarcity mindset kicks in when that happens, and they become just super afraid of their journey. Whereas the hardest step I think people make in poker is the first steps, because you said what's the worst thing that can happen? You can be 1 year older and then go to college again, and you're just 1 year older. That's the worst thing. But then you could also make it. But then a lot of the times later, the first real big downswing that comes, that puts you back into a state where it's just a step back. Then people get scared again, and that could also turn things around. Like, how did you manage to go through that phase?
Yeah. So to touch off what you said, the luck in the tournaments is always something I like to acknowledge. I mean, anytime you win a tournament, people, the interviewers ask you like, why, like they ask you like, how did you win, or what did you do to get this far? And it's like, nobody talks about the luck, but the luck is overwhelmingly the biggest factor for tournaments, right? For cash games, it's not quite that way. So I'm more proud of winning, building my bankroll up and winning, being one of the biggest winners on Full Tilt than I am winning the biggest tournament, because I know that was, they can't take that away from you with one lucky score. But then in those games on Full Tilt, the games that I built, a huge bankroll in, over the next, like 2008, I think I did well. 2009, it was one of those years in there. I don't remember, it's so long ago, but like one of those years, the game is always evolving and people are always getting better. And so I was kind of staying the same, and I was, kind of had a big ego about winning and doing so well. And I was like, top 10 biggest winners of the year. Like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and just show up and play poker. Right. But eventually the game sort of passed me by, and then good regulars moved up and players started getting better, and I was outmatched and I was completely outclassed, and I got beat in some of those games. So on some of those same big, 200, 400 no limit games that I was playing, I got spanked and I lost a large part of my bankroll. And I learned the hard way that, you really always have to be working hard, and the game is always changing, and you always have to be ahead of the curve. And if you're not working, someone will pass you by. And so that was a really expensive lesson for me, because also like a hard check on, it was a really humbling experience for me, one that I needed to have. And, it's unfortunate that it was so expensive, but sometimes that's when you learn the most. You usually don't learn things in life and in poker when things are going well and you're winning. You learn things when, unfortunately, tragedy happens. Someone close to you gets sick, and you learn about the importance of family, or something. You have a big loss in poker, and you learn about the importance of patience or bankroll management. And that's usually just how human psychology works, at least for me, where you need to have something difficult happen to grow. And so that was really tough. I had to basically completely check my ego at the door. I got staked after playing 200, 400, like making $1 million in 2007. I went back to getting staked for 2, 4, and 5, 10. And I remember I had to take, it wasn't like I was completely like busto, but I had like money set aside that was, in investments and stuff that I didn't want to touch. But my poker bankroll was, very low. And I didn't want to I didn't want to lose the rest of what I had. So I kind of said, I'm not going to gamble with this at all. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to build back. I need to prove to myself more than about the money. I need to prove to myself that I can beat the games, and that I have the discipline to grind it back. Because if I don't have the patience to go back to the beginning, then I'm just trying to basically, I'm playing for the wrong reasons. I'm playing to get rich quick type of sort of thing. And you're not in it for the love of the game and the passion, and to challenge yourself and be the best that you can be, to be the best, to compete at the highest level. So I took a couple weeks off. I went to, I think at that time I went to Hawaii for a 2-week trip, just to kind of get out of here and clear my head. And I came back, and I was August, and I started to grind. And that, there was a lot of bumps on the way. It wasn't like I came back and I just crushed it. There was obstacles, and I had days where it was difficult to focus because the money was more insignificant than what I was used to playing with. And I had all those challenges that you would expect. But what kept me going was the desire to be the best I could be. And I knew that I was capable of potentially reaching the top levels again and competing on the highest levels. And I wasn't willing to let, this setback stop me. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I don't care if it takes 6 months or a year or whatever. That was the beginning of the rebuilding of my journey. And, but that was a very tough time, mentally.
I can imagine.
Just to focus and play your best.
Playing also much lower again after playing so high is probably also a pretty tough thing to do. Also, a lot of people, when I talk to them nowadays, when they have to basically practice and getting much better on very, very low stakes, I always tell them, look, it's not about the stakes that you're playing. They always wonder, okay, what's my hourly? Well, the hourly is important in the mid or later on of your career to build. But then at the beginning, it's also really important to become good, especially, for example, in PLO these days, you just have to become good. You can directly jump into really decent sized games in live poker, for instance, if you make the money elsewhere in business, for example, but then you just get good at PLO online, very, very low stakes, just trying to get the fundamentals, and then jump into a 2-5, 5-10 PLO game in live if you have the live skill set, of course, as well. So people, I think, oftentimes, even these days, they have a lot of issues with the mindset going into poker and trying to pursue that and making money with it. They always think of bankroll building still the same way as back then. I think back then it was like that. You just build your bankroll on the lowest limits. But today, it oftentimes doesn't make that much sense anymore, I think, to do it the traditional way, but to just go and make your money elsewhere, get maybe good coaching, and then or just poker education in general, and then jump into soft games, because in the end, you only need one worse player to play heads up with, or a couple of players on a full ring table, and you're in game. It's not that you have to be super, super good at poker. You just have to find worse players to play with. It's not that you have
that's something that is a challenge, I think, was a challenge for myself and also for a lot of people I come across, where it's like, quitting a game is a sign that gets like an ego check, right? It's like difficult psychologically to quit a game because it's almost like acknowledging that, this game is too tough, or it's not worth your hourly, or there's all those sort of um, feelings of self-consciousness or inadequacy that come with that. But I think and I always go back to this when I'm coaching or something. I always ask, like, what is your motivation for playing? If you want to just be better and you want to challenge yourself and get better at poker, you need to play with better competition. Or maybe you don't care as much about your hourly, you're playing for the love of the game, or because you have 2 kids and a wife and you only have Saturdays to play, and you'll take what you can get because that's you're playing for that motivation. You're playing as an outlet. If you're playing as a professional and you're really cognizant of your hourly rate, your bankroll, you want to minimize variance, you want to just make money to pay the bills, to live your lifestyle, well, then you have to let go of all these other things about caring about what other people think, or trying to be the best necessarily, or putting in as many hours as possible. You have to kind of like check your ego at the door and deal with those sorts of things. So I think it's really first and foremost important to understand your why and what is your ambition, and then be mapping your actions to match that as best as possible. And then also just being aware that that might change over time. Like for me personally, I have days where, like, depending on the game I play, like sometimes I just like I'm in an environment, like I travel a lot. I'm in Italy now, so I don't get to play poker when I'm here. Sometimes I go back to the US and like I'm excited about playing poker, so I'll just sit down in whatever game, and I don't care if the game is tough or the game is too small or whatever. Like my hourly, I'm just excited to play. And other times when I'm playing to compete, and I really wanted to be in a great game, and I want to kind of like do the more hustle thing that a poker player does, where you're finding edges and pushing them, etc. So I think it's important to be aware of that individually. Just be more self-aware about what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then find the best, course of action to help you achieve those goals.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. When the toughest thing for me was when I kind of started. I mean, I won already a bunch of money, and then I thought, okay, what do I really do this for? This why for me to finding that again is has been a tough thing, because at some point I realized like the lifestyle, I didn't really need much in life. And as soon as you realize that you actually have what you need, and for a couple of years, no necessity is for you to grind. So I like about 2 years ago, I told myself to stop like grinding so much, because I didn't really know what for, because I already had what I needed. And subconsciously, that just told me not to grind so much anymore. Because that was the motivation for me to just, make it in poker and just provide myself with the amount of money that I needed to live. Obviously not up to an extent that I could say that I have it for 10, 20 years, which would have been even much greater. But then I had to basically change the why a little bit and say, okay, I want to do it for poker's sake. I want to become as good as possible at this game, just for the love of the game, and that I can play in the biggest games that are out there. And at some point I realized, man, this goal is actually much, much tougher, because you need so much more money for it. Because if I want to get as good as possible, I have to play in the highest games possible. And then already I have to have 500,000, 1 million for these games to not be staked in them. And then the alternative to that is to get like a backer and basically sacrifice so much of your profits, which I'm totally not a huge fan of, because you're basically just minimizing your hourly by pushing variance still through the roof. So I realized that there's actually a much, much bigger goal, and there has to be so much more effort going into it, especially in today's climate. So it's not just about grinding anymore. It's about really becoming one of the best. And then also taking up other responsibilities. I realized I just cannot do that as much. Social media and, all that you else have in life, your fitness, your relationships, like it's all a lot to take all on your shoulders. And I think that's a real challenge today for a lot of players out there, to just take on everything and finding the right reasons to play poker.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, and a lot of respect for like your own self-awareness and journey and trying to figure that out and solving that for you. So props to you for that. But like a lot of what I've I've struggled with, and I know a lot of people that I've talked to or that write to me and in social media or email struggle with is like, kind of like this underlying question, like, what am I doing it all for? you know? And I actually wrote about this. I have a video about this on my YouTube. Like, is it wrong to play poker and like playing a zero sum game? And so I share some thoughts about that. If it's a piece of content you guys are interested in, you could check that out. Google it or find it on my YouTube. But yeah, it's tough because it's one of those things that like no matter how much you build in poker, right? Like no matter how much money you make, like there's not something that you can look back on in 10 years and say like there's a difference because of the time I spent in this industry, right? Like unless you're an influencer or like you're like Doyle or Daniel, where like you shape the way that future generations come, or you're an inspiration or something like that. But like
however, isn't that the same for some sports people?
Yeah, sure, for sure. But I think the influence and the fame that comes with sports makes perhaps them feel it less, right? Because when you have the influence side of poker, like you're creating content or you're influencer, and you have people write to you and say like, you inspired me to like live my dream life, or like I look up to you, or like some nice comments that you get, then you feel like, okay, the time I'm spending in poker, is a little bit more meaningful, right? And I feel like it's easier to get that sense of meaning. And that's why I excluded some of the influencers in poker from this. But if you just are going to the casino every day and you're playing, 5-10, and like you just go there, come home and live your life and pay the bills, I feel like a lot of people struggle with that because it's like, it's
challenging. There's a lack of meaning in itself, unless you create it outside of it.
Yeah. And I'm not judging at all. I've done that and experienced that and lived that and struggled with that in my own adult life. And I feel like, everyone has to find, and I'm not here to say like you should or shouldn't, or one way is better than the other, but I think in my experience, you have to find the balance that's right for you. And I've always said, like, for me personally, poker is one slice of the pie. It's not the whole thing. And that is the balance that works the best for me. So when I feel like personally, I have other things that are going on in my life that I'm building or I'm working towards, or that I'm creating for me personally, what I feel like is a legacy that is outside of poker, that's what's right for me. That's when I feel the best. There are other people that feel different, where they're like all in on poker and that's what they want to do for their whole lives. And I think, Daniel Negreanu has tweeted about this, and mad respect to him. And like, he's like, wants to be known, or Phil Hellmuth, like wants to be known for poker their whole life. But I think, and again, I'm not saying to say what's better or worse, but I think when in my experience and speaking with a lot of people, having a lot of people write to me and coaching, whatever, the percentage of people that actually feel like they can only play poker and not have anything else and do it for a very long time are very few. So you'll have people that are excellent players that hop into poker and dedicate copious amounts of time to becoming the best, only to leave when they're at the top of the industry. You've seen people like Nicholas Heinecker do this, one of the best players in the world and online, and Fedor and other people that are going outside of poker to do other things because I don't know their motivation, but it seems to me like when you look at some of the people that have left poker and that are leaving poker, that this could be like one of the motivations behind that. Again, I'm not speaking for any of these people I mentioned, but I'm just saying you have those people that are leaving. And so I think people could play poker for a shorter period of time and be like all in on it, but to do it exclusively for like decades and decades, I feel like would be difficult for a lot of people.
I totally agree. And I think what struck me in that is the thing that you tell yourself in the end matters so much. So if you're a poker player, if you tell yourself the story that you are just grinding 5-10, or you call yourself a 2-5 or a 5-10 grinder, that's totally bad. Because if you define yourself as that and it goes wrong, or it at some point becomes meaningless to you that you do that, well, then your whole life becomes meaningless, potentially.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't define yourself through other things in your life. And that can happen to sports people as well. And you mentioned being at the peak of your career and then quitting. All those thoughts, they come up in a poker player's career, that have come up in my career, is like, okay, what would you do now That was like a question from Leo Gura, who's a YouTuber as well with actualize.org. I do a lot of self-development. So he has asked this question: what would you do today if you had $100 million?
Yeah,
And that's such a great
often.
question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it just made me realize like I would actually still play poker. And that made me somehow happy with my decision, because I realized like, yeah, it's not just about the money. It's
Great.
It's not. And also, you know, being born in Switzerland, I'm so privileged. Like I could have just had a job in Switzerland and just make a decent amount of money as a teacher. I have a teacher's degree, so I didn't quit school. It actually hindered my poker progress. Probably because I could have just, you know, went with it if I had the guts in 2011. I totally didn't. And, you know, there's also a little bit of parents' influence to be conservative and not just to go with something bold as playing poker. It probably would have worked out for me better financially if I just went with it, because obviously studying for 4.5 years leaves a pretty big financial gap. But then, you know, I also, you know, started winning at poker during that time, maybe not as much as I could have. But that's like my background a little bit. But then yeah, at some point you have to ask yourself, okay, what would you do exactly if you had this $100 million? Where would you play poker? And for me, it was clear. I would just play anyone. I just, you know, I wouldn't have a problem anymore. Like if I had $100 million, I would just sit down in every game that I want to and not give a fuck. And then I realized, oh, this is actually something worth pursuing because it actually is cool. It challenges me to the max. So to put myself in a position like that, like now I have to start grinding again, which seems really bad because that's not.
You're trying to climb a mountain, you know.
Yeah,
that's cool. You know,
exactly.
So you have a motivation that's supersedes measuring, keeping score with money. You know, you're really trying to climb a mountain.
And then on the other sense, it's also, okay, what story do you tell yourself about the whole next 30, 40 years? Like, yeah, if you just tell yourself, okay, you've grinded poker and it's all you've been doing. No, you can also become an influencer and stand for something. Playing poker, you can stand for somebody who had a lot of reasons to quit poker. Like I have a lot of reasons. Like I could have just had a normal job and just take the easy life. Not very easy, because teaching is tough, and you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work that I feel like than a 9-to-5 job. Like at least from my experience,
demanding. You have like the psychological connection with all of your students, and that's demanding to be like a mentor to them as well.
It doesn't let you go at the end of at the weekend. You can somehow, and like similar to poker, I think both teaching and poker have a lot of similarities, and they just don't let you go in your free time as easily. Or I've struggled.
You're always engaged. Yeah. And also working for yourself. I find the same way building, you know, business. It's all. You're always engaged, you know.
Your own business, being self-employed as well. Like all these areas, they consume it up to a very high degree, and you have to find means to just counter that a little bit. But then when you go on this journey now, okay, you can be an influencer telling that, okay, you stand for somebody who didn't give up. You have a lot of reasons to, just because of other incentives in your life, just because of so many people outside the poker industry telling you not to go this route. I mean, if you care a lot about what other people think, and a lot of us humans are that way, then you have so many reasons to quit poker at some point, or to quit playing poker professionally, but then you don't, and you just persevere through that and just still try to become the best version of yourself. And I think if I can prove that in the next 10 years, then that's something worth doing, because that will inspire people even outside of poker. If you did something and stuck with it, and just, you know, proof that if you have enough persistence, that you can make something happen. Because
I mean, I'm inspired by watching Roger Federer play tennis, and I have no desire to be a great tennis player, but it's also amazing to see someone so talented and such a champion, and then you take that and bring it to your own craft or your own art or your own job, and you know, you channel that energy, right? So it's not zero sum in that way, and you can have that impact, obviously maybe not at that scale, right, in poker, but it's also hard to be Roger Federer, but you know, if you have that on a small scale with anything you're doing, content creating or sharing, or being an example or something like that, then I find that, you know, really inspiring too. And I think, like, at this point in my career, I'm much more excited about sharing my journey and maybe being a reference or an influence or a point of inspiration for others than I am about more accolades in poker. Like, I don't have I don't have any ambition in poker really. I mean, I'd like to win the main event, but like that's always like it's more like the 16-year-old inside of me that started playing poker that launched his, the last half of my life. I'm 32 now, with that dream that like, okay, that would be the one thing that I would do. So I guess every year I'll play the main, but it's not like I don't really want anything out of poker. I'm like grateful for everything it's given me. And I've put in so much time to poker that I feel like there's other things in my life that are, um, demanding some attention. I'm still playing. I still like to compete. I still like to be the best I can, but I feel like having that balance between that and then sharing my journey or sharing the lessons. Like one thing I've been trying to do more of and doing recently in the last year is giving keynotes and talks to like marketing or business conferences about, um, playing poker and the lessons I've learned that in poker that apply towards life and business as well. And that's been like super rewarding. Like, it's like you're on stage, and I grew up in musical theater. So I love that environment where it's like the live environment. And then it feels like, having the lights on you when you're playing poker on television is cool. But I feel like doing it in a way that's didactic, where you're sharing some message you've learned, is way cooler. Like I had this guy come up to me after a speech I gave and said like, you inspired me to like pick up my guitar, like learn guitar that I've always wanted to do. And like that compliment, stuck with me more than stacking someone on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, like it's just that I guess that's more of, what I connect to and resonate with now. So I kind of been following that more. And so I
Yeah.
guess like it's just about finding that balance. There's no right answer.
And you have so much, yeah, that impact is just a key value of yours, that, the more impact you have, the more satisfaction you get out of life. And that way, through creating content and documenting also what you do and then giving these keynotes, you can basically have that impact. Also, there's something certainly that interests me, because I don't do keynotes yet, but I certainly would be interested in the future to do that, because I think that a lot of people in business, they are interested when they talk to me about poker and what I learned, what I also think that applies to business and to life. And I've certainly had some good conversations with people outside of poker. And I always tell people who are, even some that I've talked to that are way more successful than me, that I think they underestimate the game. I mean, they just say that it's like a lot. I've heard this a lot from better players than me. That it's meaningless, that, you just play poker to make some money and then you go and grow your business and that's it. And I say, look, it's just not that simple. I mean, poker is still a game of people, and it just tells you so much about yourself and other people. And if you really focus on that, on that kind of information that you can gain from the game, that's totally not strategy related, then you actually discover how much there is in the game. And
it's a deeper meaning of playing the game. I'm dropping a video. I don't know when. I just was editing it with my team this week, but in the future soon on my YouTube. But about this subject, where it's like, if you're really challenging yourself in poker, like the game could be like a metaphor for your own self-development, right? And you can learn so much about yourself or your own weaknesses and things you want to improve through the game, through the discipline of the game. And so I found that like a lot of times when I'm playing now, it's like a challenge to be the best version of myself, to work on, my humility, to work on, my patience, to work on my gratitude, right? Just for being at the table. Like, and I talked about this in the video. It's so easy to be, feel like ungrateful or frustrated about and begrudge your luck, because you're like, oh, I flopped the set and got no action. But I always try and look at those situations as a challenge to have perspective of like, how lucky am I to be able to sit down and just play poker when there's people in the world that are living on $2 a day, and I was dealt an amazing hand in life, because I live in a reality where I was born, we were born in the first world, where we have opportunity because of the hand we were dealt. We weren't born, stomping rice in a field somewhere in Malaysia or Indonesia, where you can't turn that hand into a winning hand, so to speak, right? You can't
Well, it takes
necessarily.
I think arguably like any hand can be taken into winning, but it takes a lot of luck. And
yeah, exactly. But like the hand that we were dealt, or most people watching this, is premium, right? It's like one of the best hands that you can have, and you have all this opportunity. Whereas there's so many people in the world that were given so much less than me or anyone watching, and so just being aware of that and using poker as a way to like help better understand the role of luck in life and how it's been so bestowed upon me has made me more of a grateful person. And so like I feel like when I go play poker now, it's almost more about the connection with that aspect of playing and growth than it is about constructing ranges and balance and frequencies and that sort of thing. And so that's been another rewarding challenge of the game, is like you can get so much out of, and this could be true for any craft, like whether you're an athlete or a bodybuilder or an artist. There's all these sort of deeper levels that you can go to with your craft, and I feel like a lot of times, when you look at some of the stories that people tell about succeeding at high levels of their careers, like they have these lessons that they take from what they do, like being a Marine commander or a Navy SEAL, right? Like it's not about the technical skills they have, it's about like the lessons they've learned through friendship and camaraderie and whatever through their craft. And so I feel like poker provides that same sort of thing. And perhaps you kind of nailed it, that people are interested in poker in the way of the the keynote world, is that we have a unique perspective. And even if people are way more successful and they don't have the perspective of a poker player, because everyone in their circle is in business. And so poker allows you to kind of talk about things in a way and concepts that don't often come up in everyday life.
yeah, I also thought that looking at, or in general, looking or listening to successful people, or people just have accomplished a lot. I mean, for example, you mentioned Navy SEALs, and I think just listening to David Goggins and just how tough of a guy he was because of his perspective and circumstances, it's just insane. Like it just opens up a whole new world to you of what humans are capable of. I don't know. Have you heard of David Goggins a little bit? Or
no, I've seen like a few Navy SEALs that have spoken about some of their journeys as well, but not this one particular.
Yeah, I mean, he's had an extremely tough childhood of his father beating not only his mother but him and his brother, and yeah, so and then also being mocked at school and everything. So the total worst childhood, he said, like bottom 1%, and then he basically described his journey on becoming Navy SEALs and barely passing that with an exam. And then he ends up and tells his stories in his book Can't Hurt Me, where he just literally tapes his broken feet and keeps on going.
Mm-hmm.
Like he literally went on broken feet, which is, to me, it sounds like absolutely insane. But apparently, when circumstances are the right way, this human managed to overcome even that.
Incredible.
So,
What an inspiring story.
Yeah, so I think that so much in life is just circumstantial on how you react, and somehow I also think that being very privileged can be a bad circumstance for you to be hungry in some way.
Yeah. You see stories about people that come from hardship that are more driven than people that come from affluence, right? And like you said, it is a lot about it's. I find that life isn't so much about what happens to you; it's about how you interpret what happens to you. So if you come from hardship and you interpret that to mean this is a challenge for me and I'm going to overcome this, and this is not going to stop me, and I'm going to show myself what I'm capable of, or the world, or whatever, then that could drive you to be even more driven and motivated than someone that comes from that situation, and then their viewpoint is, I'll never make it because I'm unlucky in life. And those two people can come from the same circumstance, but then like what they're telling themselves, or how they interpret that event ends up leading to the way that they approach the world. And then the same is true for people that come from affluence, right? Like it could come from both ways.
It just leads me to a topic what I think what I'm investigating recently a little bit is also in my own life, but in other people's life, is how much of what you do and accomplish comes from a background of emotion, and what comes from rationality and just trying to go a certain way. Do you have any strong feelings towards that in your life? How much has it come from emotion and desire to have something? And then how much comes from just, daily practice and just knowing what's good, more like your rational side of things?
Maybe use an example or explain your thoughts, and then I can elaborate, because I'm a little
Okay, sure.
I have an idea, but I might be going the wrong. It might be tangential here, depending on.
Sure. I mean, for me emotional is knowing the feeling of being somebody who has just completely financial freedom, who can play poker whenever he wants, and just do with the money that you have from poker, and have a lot of cool projects that help a lot of other people. And you don't have to think about your investments as much anymore, because you can just go for it and try it out. And that's like the emotional things, like how you picture something to happen. And then the rationalist thing is, if I want to move to the higher stakes, I have to practice in Pio and Monker Solver, and go into every spot between each positions and look at the strategies and flop, turn, river, and of course pre-flop, and just practice that every day, and just have that practice, but without that emotion attached to it. So how do you think that those two combine in your life?
It's funny you mentioned that. I one of the talks I gave was about the relationship. It was a talk I gave for Cisco to the like decision making team, and we talked about the process of making decisions. And my talk was about intuition versus logic, and I used the hand I played as an example. And you may have seen it on YouTube. I folded a set of nines to Chad Holloway on TV on Poker Night in America, where I bet out, flopped the set, and he raised me, and I folded right away, and he had a straight. And I talked about this hand in a situation where, like, the process I use to make decisions, and then the process I think is a good way to approach decision making in general. And it's like, in poker, there's like I feel like a big debate amongst like the community is like, should you be an exploitative player or should you be a GTO player? And it's almost like these two camps are always like disagreeing and fighting and bickering and whatever. The way I sort of see it is like, the best decisions are made using a combination of both logic and intuition, but it's important to understand the relationship between these two things. So your first approach towards something, I feel like, is always emotional. Like, it has to come from some sort of emotional standpoint, some intuitive standpoint, right? Like
an experience maybe too.
Right, sure. Or like a deep desire. Let's use a trivial example in decision making. Let's say you meet someone and you're trying to determine whether or not you like them. Your first reaction is always emotional, right? It's always intuitive, whether you're aware of it or not. It's not like I could say, oh, I like you because you have that shirt and I have a similar shirt, or your headphones are cool, or like, you're not using rational logic to determine these sorts of things. It's not like, it's just a feeling, whether you can trust someone or not, or whether you like them, or whether you're attracted to them. Like, I remember walking into an office where I saw my wife for the first time, and I was immediately attracted to her. But it wasn't like the color of her boots plus her shoes times her belt that equaled some formula for sexiness, right? Like, it was just a feeling. And so that's sort of like the first thing that happens with decisions in poker, and I feel like in life as well. Like, when you generally are in a big spot on the river and someone's bets, you might just get this feeling like, I think he's bluffing. And that's not something that's necessarily rational. But then it's not just like you're going to throw every sort of logic out the window before you make a decision. Like, you're not just going to be like, oh, I'm attracted to this woman, let me get married to her. Or I'm this guy's bluffing, I'm just not going to think about anything. You're also using that information to make a decision that's based on logic to some extent. But you can say to yourself, okay, the fact that I think he's bluffing will change the likelihood that he has a strong hand versus the likelihood that he has a weak hand. And so I'm going to include more bluffs in his range. So when I'm calculating my equity versus range, it's probably slightly more likely that he's bluffing based on my intuition. And therefore my chance of winning goes up. So I can make I could call with a wider range of hands. So like, you can still back up what you're saying based on math and based on logic. So I feel like that's sort of the relationship that I focus on. And when it comes to my own life with things that like I want to do or want to accomplish, like most of the things always start from some place of some emotion, right? Like I'm compelled to share a message I have. And then so I rationally say to myself, okay, what's the best way to do that? Should I script a video out on YouTube? And then what should the title be? Maybe I should focus on SEO. And then you focus on all these rational things to back up what your passion or emotion or your purpose is in life. You know, and I sort of feel like that's sort of the way that I just approach things. But I feel like without the former of the intuition and the emotion, the latter of the rationale will just eventually like get burnt out. Like you can't just say like, you know, for the sake of trying to be a better poker player, I'm just going to study PIO all day until I'm the best. Like you have to have that initial emotion or drive or intuition or impact that you can do it. You can be the best, or you have a purpose that's really pulling you towards something. And then you can go towards the rational side and say, like, let me execute on what's the best way to do it.
I mean, for me, it's a extremely interesting topic, and where you let your emotions dictate up to what extent do you let your emotions dictate on where you're going? Also, yep. in a poker hand, because as you say, there's always some intuition about some spot, and then just think about, okay, how much does that make sense now? And then you go through all the motions and try to. So I think that's the difference in poker between minimally exploitive and maximally exploitive. I don't like maximally exploitive because I think it's too wishy-washy, and you just think, oh yeah, you have all these reads, and I don't think that's just the case. I think a lot of the times the intuition is right, and you pick up on some subconscious things that you just have seen before, and if you can never say for certain that that's true, but you pick up on some elements in the hand of some elements, yeah. Especially in live poker. And as you say, you just go through the motions and okay, how much do I want that let influence my decision-making process? Say, all right, I'm going to add like a little bit of certainty to that is bluffing. And then if I can find enough bluffs still that also makes sense and not so many value hands, and I'm just going to call. Yeah. And I think that's just then totally fine with a poker hand, and just also accepting if you're wrong. But then also that applies to so many other different situations, as in life. When you said it. You said when you mentioned your wife and when you met her, it's how much do you know at first just based on the emotions that's the way you want to go. Yeah, well you try it out, but then all the rational kicks in and it's like, okay, at what point do you doubt, or at what point do you have confirmation based on rational? I think that's a pretty big task in life to have that rational cover the emotional part that you're basically feeling.
Yeah, I would elaborate on two things you said. One is I agree with you that it's not like every hand you play you're going to listen to emotion, because there's not every hand where you have an intuition about someone, right? Like how often do you meet someone and you're like, I'm super attracted to them? Or how often do you meet someone and you're like, I really like them, or I really don't like them? Most of the time you don't have that extreme feeling inside. But when you do, the few and far between times that you do, it's usually right. So I would say that like the caveat to this is that it's not like every hand I'm looking for some sign from above that I have some amazing read, but like the times that it comes up are few and far between. But when they do, I usually always listen to it because they're usually right. And that's true in life and in poker for me personally. So I find that the times that I override intuition with logic, I usually pay the price, but it's not that I necessarily have intuition with a high frequency. And maybe that's because maybe through some sort of like Zen Buddhism, you can cultivate the intuition to happen more frequently. That's a whole separate discussion. But I guess what I'm saying is the intuition sort of thing comes up infrequently. So the second thing I would add is like in life, like when I'm making big decisions in life, I'm almost always going off of what I feel is right. So for example, I remember I was debating marrying Ambra, and not like debating really, but like just like asking myself the questions. Like we've been together for 2 years. I was, let's see, 32, 20. We met when I was 24. I was 26 years old. And so I was like, like the idea started popping up in my head. And so the fact that the idea popped up meant that it was time to start asking myself some questions like, wow, I'm actually thinking about this. Like I wasn't thinking about this when I was 18. So the fact that I'm thinking about it means something. Like, what does it mean? Like, how do I know that what that means is necessarily a yes or a no? So I did all these like rational things, right? Like I'm like, well, I'm 26, maybe I'm too young, I should wait. So that's like a GTO thing, right? Like a logic sort of thing. And then I'm like, well, let me ask my friend who I respect, who's married, faithfully married, which was very important to me, but also with kids, and who was happy that he was married. So I was like, take advice from people who you want to emulate, not just from anyone, right? So I asked him, and I'm like, Steve, how do you know? And he's like, well, when you're ready to be faithful to one person, and you also know when you pick three things, like when the person has the three most important things. When they check those boxes, you can go all in, and you sort of give up the rest, right? Like you want to buy a car, you want it to be fuel efficient and fast and sleek, you pick a Tesla. It's not going to necessarily be everything, but it's going to be almost everything, right? And so he's like, that was what he was saying. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So rationally going back to this, I'm like, well, Ambra certainly checks all these boxes, right? Like she no question. And I also feel like I'm ready. We were together for 2 years. I was happy to be with her. But then I'm like, am I really going to like now move forward with, my dad, when I turned 22, we went out to dinner in Italy, and he told me, like, for your birthday, I'm giving you my best piece of advice, which is the most important decision in life is who you marry, because every decision you make about the rest of your life is based on who you choose as a partner, right? Like where you live, how you raise your kids, like the opportunities and businesses you have. And so that really stuck with me. And I'm like, shit, am I really going to make the biggest decision of my life because my wife checks these boxes, or because on paper this sort of makes sense? So then I did something, and I'm like, you know what? Like this is ridiculous. Like I'm going to go back and forth between like pros and cons, even though there weren't really any cons, but like I'm never going to take action if I'm just sort of in this like logical headspace. So I'm like, let me do something. It really changed my relationship with decision making. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to close my eyes and sit here. I'm going to ask myself a question. And I said, Alec, like, should you marry this woman? You have 3 seconds to decide. And I was like, it was so obvious that the answer was yes to me. And so I was like, this is the right decision. Like all the quantifying in the world isn't going to tell me what I already intuitively know about something that is, bigger than anything your rational mind could contemplate. Just like the same when you meet someone, like, can you trust this person? Is this a good relationship? Do you like this person? Or when you're looking at a new home, do you like this place? Like, it's not the color of the home. It's just the energy of that experience, right? So then I went out that day. I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And I went to the jewelry store, and I bought a wedding ring, and we got engaged, and we got married, and we've been married 6 years. And
here you are years later.
Great, but then, like, we're still early in the scheme of things in marriage, 6 years, but
of course,
hopefully another 60 to go. And so that's kind of how I make like big decisions in life, and that's how I think is this an approach that works for me.
I think there's in the end the thing that drives you is still going to be the emotion most of the time for all our decisions, like whether you're buying a car, your relationship, and everything. But then the question is always like, how, if you look at the data too, like how many people get divorced? Like, I
was actually looking at this by country, and it's about,
it's insane.
40, 45, like depending on where you live and whatever.
And you look at it, okay, but they also made their decisions based on the emotion most of the time. But then when these emotions change, especially when you look at the research, like after getting into it for like 7 years, all these hormones start to flatten out a little bit. And, and when you look at that, then you understand, okay, how good of a decision was it in retrospect? Yeah. So I think, the debate about this, having logic versus emotion, and then how you make it, is just endless. And I think it's lifelong learning. And I'm so grateful that I have poker, because poker just somehow makes me train that more. Like it just...
you're training it every day, right?
You're training it every day, like decision-making in general.
Decision-making process.
Yeah, and I want to just become super good at it, because I think like naturally, we all have like these flaws, and I'm for sure I have these flaws. And so I think, okay, if I'm training this now for 10, 20 years, or whatever, how long I'm going to be in this as a professional or recreational or whatever, it's just going to help me no matter what, not just in poker. I think the EV, the future EV of playing poker is at least in the decision-making process. I'm always telling myself that because I think a lot of people, as I mentioned before in this podcast, they just completely forget about this aspect of the game. There is future EV of you playing poker. It is in becoming a better decision maker and evaluating what is it in you that leads just to a good decision that you can be happy with long term as well.
Yeah, I feel like in poker, you're really a professional decision maker and a professional risk taker. Those are like really at the core of what you are. Those are the skill sets that come away from poker that sort of transcend the game, that can help you in not just like parallel industries like stock trading or investing, but just in general, like general business or general decisions in life as well.
Yeah, I think risk taking is also a pretty interesting topic in general. Like I tend, like from a childhood background, I tend to be not a big risk taker. But then in poker, of course, you learn that on the river when you have a polarized distribution, it makes total sense to take a big risk if you have the perfect bluffing hand, for instance. So that becomes somewhat normal to me. But then in other areas,
you're not really taking a big risk. You're taking
a calculated risk, and it's like, okay, when do you take a risk that's actually big and emotionally based again, or when you take a big risk and it's just very calculated? I think so, in general, the calculation part of that is actually in poker more easily because you train it all the time. But when you look outside of poker, then oftentimes I think we won't take that risk. We're just made at this risk taking. There's always some excuse we find of not taking a certain risk. And I think training that is even more crucial than the other thing.
Yeah, so you mentioned a good topic with calculated risk. And actually, one of the guys that I gave my keynote alongside with at Cisco was a guy named Sam Shakant, who's a grandmaster chess player. He's like one of the top 5 or 10 in the world. And he talks about risk taking through chess, right? So chess is his sort of metaphor for life. And he talks about a match with Bobby Fischer versus, I think, Spassky and the world champions. And so the standard opening move is e4, where like you open your center pawn up. And he talks about calculated risk being, doing something that surprises your opponents, but that is also like logical, like c4, where you move your third pawn over from the left to up 2 pieces. And so this opening move like threw off his opponent, and he ended up winning a game, which was like deciding in the match, and the rest is history, right? And so, but he also talks about like not doing like blunder, stupid risks like a4, like moving your right side pawn all the way up, because it's just like terrible move, right? So like, I think like there's a spectrum, right? And like you could take risks that are over here, and you could take risks that are over here. But like if you take risks that are like within the range of, let's say, like 40th to 60th percentile, like somewhere in the middle, that are like calculated risks, like maybe they're not like the perfect opportunity, right? Like you're not going to have like the perfect distribution to bluff on the river, but like you're taking a risk where like the odds are in your favor, but it's calculated. That's where I think we can stay inside this window of decisions that make sense, that are logical, but that are based in risks. And I think Annie Duke talks a lot about it in the book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. It's a great book, highly recommend it. That like we're sort of taught to think in terms of black and white, like things are either binary, like they're either yes or no, or 100% or 0. But like most decisions in life have an expectation. And so, for example, like your bluff might work 65% of the time, but that's better than checking and not taking that 65% risk, right? So like you're checking, you're going to lose 100%. You're bluffing, you're going to win 65%. So like that's a better option. But like the times that it doesn't work and you lose, shouldn't necessarily deter you from taking the right play, because you're still going to win 65% in the long term. So it's important to kind of like understand that there are no like black and white things, right? So like if your business has a 90% chance of success and it fails, or your marriage has a 90% chance of success and it fails, it doesn't mean that like you made the wrong decision. It just means that you fell within that space of the I guess calling it unlucky, but the unexpected, or the smaller frequency route where you bluff and your opponent has quads. Like if he's going to fold everything with the nuts, you didn't make the wrong bluff. You just ran into the top of his range, right? You just got sort of unlucky that he was within that frequency. So I feel like when it comes to risks, that's sort of the way to approach it. And poker really teaches you that. It teaches you to think like, okay, well, I didn't make a bad risk. I just got unlucky that he had these strong sorts of hands. And in life, it's sort of the same way. Like you can't just wait for there to be like the perfect set of circumstances to execute on anything, asking a woman out on a date, right? Like you can't just wait for her to like whisper in your ear that she likes you. Like there's no risk in that, right? Like she's always giving you phone number, but like you might have to take more risk or like, I mean, there's anything you can apply this sort of thing to, right?
I think results orientedness, that's like one aspect you mentioned, and the connection to binary thinking. This is really big. Like also for the transition to become a professional or having the mindset of a professional poker player, you really want to shy away from that, from being results oriented about whether your plays were working, and also avoiding this binary thinking of, either this was good or this was bad. And I think that exactly goes back to the topic before, to the emotional thinking, because the emotions will always have a binary thinking attached to that. Emotions is always one way or the other, very binary. It's either this has been good, this has been bad. If you look at the YouTube comments that are out there on all kinds of videos, this has been super terrible and this has been super good, but it's never in between.
Or like this was the right play or this was the wrong play. Like when I post a hand of the day, it's like, you should never bluff here, or you should never bet here. But like even if you look at like PIO, right, you look at what like a GTO sort of approaches towards poker, like most things have frequencies, right? Like there's not necessarily a right answer. Like it's some of the time you should do this, it's some of the time you should do that. And so not thinking, getting outside of binary thinking is a challenge, because we're usually not raised that way. Like you take a test and there is a right answer and it's either A, B, or C. And like the other answers are incorrect. They're not like fractions of wrong. They're like the wrong answer. So like 2 + 2 is not 5 or 3, it's 4. So there's not like a fraction of 5 that is correct. It's like completely binary. But in life, it's not really like that. It's more like situational or circumstantial. So
having that difference between something that are facts and the emotional part where you just have some feeling of where you go. And I think that especially when we look at or let's put it that way, if you don't have an emotional opinion or something, let's say a YouTube video posted or hand you posted or that I posted, then you could remain silent. But as soon as you speak up, there's very, very few people that do speak up that actually do not have this binary thinking. This is bad and this is good. This has been correct call. This has been a wrong call. They always take a side. Whereas when you think of higher level players, the higher level players who look and say, they become so much more critical thinkers of not only their own play, but other people's play. And they say, this has probably been a low EV bluff because this and this and this. And they never say like this has been a, completely clueless bluff unless they are bringing in emotions. But then they say this is a low EV play. Or if you see somebody, for example, in PLO bluffing with the busted nut flush draw, which is often going to be a bad play, a low EV play because of blockers involved. Well, do you know that this is low EV, but it's still going to work sometimes if the opponent has exactly the right hand. And then you can really tell apart from who has a good decision-making process or can judge a poker hand the right way based on the way you phrase it. And I think,
that's
you
always a challenge on my hand of the day show. It's like, you can't like bore people with like, I ran the numbers and 35% of the time you should bet this flop and 65% of the time it just becomes a little bit too dry, right? To get into the PIO for like an entertaining show that you want to reach the masses, like hand of the day. But then I always try and be like, well, these are the cases for betting and these are the cases for checking, to imply that like there's merit to both, and then they could kind of decide for themselves what's better. And then usually I'll give my opinion. Like if something is 70% of a bet, I'll say, I like betting here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's binary, and so that's a challenge for talking
for you as a content creator as well.
Complex subjects like strategy within poker that are like situational, and then also adding in the level of like the exploitative approach where it's like, you also want to consider, if it's 70% bluff or bet, you also want to consider who your opponent is. If he's a calling station, maybe you should bluff 0%. Like you might want to turn that 70 into a 0, or not, maybe that's a little dramatic, but into a 10 or something like that. So there's all those sort of levels and variables that play into decision making, and that sort of influence these sorts of things too. And that's a challenge as a content creator. I find personally that that's fun, and it's it's a fun challenge.
And sometimes it's also fun to throw them off a little bit, or in your videos when you analyze a poker hand, because of exactly you knowing that bringing out the dry pio or the facts is not going to help, because it's just not what people connect to. Like in video making, what I learned is from my mistakes, looking at the data, I see, if I bring up the truth about a poker hand, and these days, let's be honest, anyone using the right programs can analyze a poker hand really, really in a sound way.
Yes.
It doesn't even matter how good you are. Like there's plenty of people out there who can do something on pen and paper or with the programs as an aid. But if they had to execute on it in a live poker setting, especially where there's so many other variables where they have to sit at a table and they can be observed, they would just completely get destroyed, just because they're not gonna be able to hide the information that they should, just because of their poor live poker skill set. And online the same way, they might get emotional because of the money involved and whatever. So they might have a really good skill set in terms of solver work, but they just cannot apply this on the tables.
Yes.
And yeah, if that's the case, then how do we do videos? Well, we have to somehow make people emotional. We have to be really careful on what we put out there, especially with the heated discussions. I once put out there a video, and I called it, I still remember, was it Johnson, Engel? No, I didn't say Engel. No, it's slow roll. It was slow roll. Engel and slow roll is like the two things that people get so heated about, and you probably know it better than anyone. But like
I know that
one. You heard that one. So slow rolling, I said slow roll. And slow roll has such a bad connotation to it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I could have said nit roll, because it was clearly at the World Series.
But it's also like not as well used of a term and whatever.
Yeah, and especially people don't know the term nit roll and say, all right, I'm not going to use nit roll because I'm kind of trying to educate people on that. And no, I'm just going to use slow roll. Fuck it. And there's so many people just like, who are you? You're here on YouTube now, and you tell us that, what the fuck do you know about poker? What would you do when you play for $1 million? And I know that, like in my mindset, if I was heads up, like it would be a pretty big slot. Couldn't really predict how I would act, but I would know that if you have locked up so much money as a second place in a heads up in a main event, it's really never about the money anymore. Like people don't understand the emotion.
Especially in the heat of the moment, and like the emotion of being just so deep in a tournament. It's about like, I just want to win this thing. And
you just want to win
it. Later, rationally, it might be about the money when like 2 weeks, 3 weeks have gone by, and you have time to think about like the impact of additional $5 million to your life. Like, okay, then it's but in the moment.
And I thought that final hand between Johnson and what was the opponent again? Miles, exactly. It was just a perfect example of emotion versus rational, because his emotions were telling him to, not cut it. Rationally, he would have known that it's a snap call.
Like logically, it's a snap call. Like everybody knows that.
But then his emotions just took on, like, it just was in the back of his head. Yeah, maybe he has value here. Maybe.
I was also thinking he was thinking like they battled so long.
Yeah.
And it was like so late, and he's like sitting there thinking like, wait a minute, is it really over? Like,
is that it?
Like, all I have to do is call. Like, is this it? Like, I think if I was in that spot, I was trying to put myself in his spot. I was just kind of like, wait, not is it this easy? It's not like an easy call, but is it like, is this all I have to do is just call here and win? Like, I have to think about it. Like, maybe there's, like, I mean,
there's something I can do. Maybe.
Yeah, like exactly. Yeah. So I totally think that was blown out of proportion. I think that was ridiculous.
Exactly.
For sure on the content creation side, the challenge of being like entertaining versus informative is very difficult. And there are some content creators that do it very well, that you see on YouTube, that are like entertaining and informative. And that's a challenge. And that's I feel like on YouTube for free content, that's where you want to be, right? Like you want to be in that sweet spot of like, someone can learn something regardless of what you're teaching. Like someone can learn something, but they can also be entertained. because that's why they come to, I feel like, watch content. Like if I think about psychologically my own motivation for watching something, like let's say I watch a travel vlog, like I want to be entertained, but I also kind of want to learn about like a cool badass destination that I've never seen. But like that's really challenging to find that sweet spot. And then there are other mediums of content that are like strictly informative. Like we have our membership at Conscious Poker, where it's like you're paying for a monthly service, and your intention for going to our membership and logging into the back end is not to like, I mean, of course, being entertained is like a percentage, like nothing is binary, but maybe entertainment is 10% of why you're going and 90% because you want to actually get better at poker. So like our content reflects that, where it's like me there with a notepad and Poker Cruncher, and like, you know, you're doing more technical analysis, you're going deeper into the content of things that you don't share on YouTube, because like your audience and the medium to which you're trying to express your content and the intention is much more formed to that. But on YouTube, like you have to find, you know, you have to also keep people's attention, which it becomes increasingly difficult, you know, every year with
versus scattering attention on also
bite-sized content, you know, content being shorter and shorter, like doing long form. Like really, I really, you know, commend you, respect you for doing long form interviews like this, because for someone to sit down and watch an hour or 2 hour interview of someone on YouTube is like a big obstacle when there's, you know, 30-second content on Instagram. And so that like, it's just so much more, you know, there's like so much more like dopamine, I think, released when you just do like those quick little interactions.
It's always for a minority of the audience, I would say. Like my Poker podcast is for a minority and not for the majority. So I try to mix it in a little bit. I definitely see, I also know that from Joe Ingram, because he's posted that it's bad for the algorithm, etc. But I still want to do it because I enjoy doing them. And I don't want to just do everything for the algorithm that my channel is just currently promoted and whatever.
No, you have to do what you feel like is your content. And then like, otherwise you're not going to produce your best. You're not going to enjoy it. You're going to get burnt out. But look at what someone that you mentioned, Ingram, does long form podcasts. Look at what Tim Ferriss does, like at scale, like where he does 2 to 3 hour podcasts with different people. And sure, the people are, you know, A-listers usually, but some people are not. And, you know, he keeps people's attention for hours on end through a podcast, which isn't even video, like, and you know, and so it works, you know, if you find something that you're really passionate about, I think that'll bring out.
And also it brings me out a little bit of my comfort zone, because this is not like what I'm used to. Like I'm pretty new to this. You're like the 12th guest right now.
Yeah,
so
and we don't know each other. Like we talk for
10
minutes, just for the audience to catch up to speed. We're not like, we're not like, we don't have a 10-year history. We talked for literally, I think, 10 minutes off the record before this podcast. So like I'm learning everything about you as we're doing this in real time and we're filming it. So
has a very high,
that's another challenge for you that you have to, like, you know, bring on guests and learn about them and do research and all that stuff. So you did great.
And what I try to do more and more is, and then I basically look for like role models, and a lot of people bring up Joe Rogan, and what he's doing good, a lot of people say, is he's able to ask very, very critical questions.
Yeah, he's really it's truly unbelievable how good he is at asking, like, at being the perfect balance of like very intelligent but also like very accessible to everyone, right? When you hear some people speak that, and he has brilliant people on the show, like Neil deGrasse Tyson does a great job of this. He's clearly one of the most brilliant minds in our world today as a scientist, but like he also has this uncanny ability to share things in a way that is colloquial and for people to understand in common vernacular, which is very challenging for people that are like genius, you know, astrophysicists. And Joe Rogan has this uncanny ability to like just speak to everyone while asking questions that everyone's thinking or wondering, but then do it in a way that like allows people that are, you know, very specialized in their task to explain it in a way that everyone can understand. He makes it look so easy. So it makes it almost feel like, oh wow, like how cool would it be to be Joe Rogan? All he does is sit down and talk to brilliant people or smart people or funny people, but like it's his ability to do it that is so deceptively
that just separates him from all the, you know, others that are doing podcasts. And it's like for 3 hours I listen to like a biology more Darwinistic podcast, I think that was just all about, how we were the last thousands of years and how we developed. And it was so interesting to me. And I just had to listen to the end, just the way he basically kept the dialogue going. And what I asked myself before.
How about Elon Musk?
I didn't. Well, I bought this book. I bought this book, Elon Musk book, and also listened a little bit to the podcast, I think, with Joe Rogan. But Elon Musk is tough to keep. At some point, you've seen it a little bit, in my opinion, and it's tough to keep on going. Like I'm at some point kind of disconnecting a little bit of how, also what it stands in the book, etc. But I get like a little bit the mindset. It's just out of.
Yeah, he's off the spectrum too, but in a good way. I mean, the world needs him.
But on a personal level, there's also so many small elements that you can see, how much less importance that has to him than his project, his mission. Like he just does not give a fuck. Like it just doesn't matter the way he handles everything else. And so
talk about a man that's driven by mission. That is inspiring. So I'm really trying to understand like how everyone thinks and like how they like approach the world, and then like take the things from them that are good qualities, and like try and like really understand how they think about that and embody that. And I find with him, it's like his dedication to something bigger than himself that is just really unique and inspiring. And look at what he's done. I mean, it's truly incredible.
So from that whole social media topic, the one critical question that I actually want to ask you is like, what did you learn from the incident 2 years ago on Poker Night in America? Like, what was the big takeaway also from what happened afterwards? Because there's probably so many thoughts you had compared. I mean, at least, Well, what did you take away from it? Because I don't really care about like the drama too much that's behind it, but like, what did you take away from yourself for yourself?
Man, just like how it was really hard for me. Like, I guess I just like how important my like reputation is to me, like how important that is more than like anything else, and like, that's really all you have. And so that was a big takeaway. I mean, I always felt that way before. I always felt like that was like just something that I valued the most, but like that definitely reinforced that idea. And then also just like how like everything you say and like matters, like that was a big part of it too. Like I remember I said like something on camera where like I just put this here and whatever, and like the fact that it wasn't just there, but it was like 30 minutes before, but like one thing you say like really affects
all your small actions too, right?
And like that sort of thing. And then just like the overall, I guess, responsibility and impact and influence that your decisions and your actions and like you have to reach other people like has, for good or for bad, and that's like something that it's interesting to see like when people react to certain things.
Were you, when you were sitting at the table back then, were you aware of that going on in you? Were you like self-aware of, or did you ask yourself in that moment when, the floor came over, and I think it was like a 20-minute thing, were you aware that what you could be doing in this moment could affect things and it kind of inhibited you? Or did you feel like you were inhibited and kind of taking the right action? Because the way I saw it is that, like, if you thought about, okay, what would I do? Like, if this was a home game, and I thought that, taking like the 5K chip and saying, okay, like, what do we do with this floor? And saying, okay, do I just take this off? And no big deal. And just trying to calm the situation. I know that whenever something happens at a poker table, I try to calm it down and just make it less dramatic. Like, it only happened to me once that it went out of my control. And I still remember that moment. I felt bad about it because, first of all, like 2 other recs thought I was actually doing something wrong. And that was important to me, that I was trying to justify that I clearly didn't have any intention. But then knowing, and that there's this one thing, when something like a situation happens at the poker table, what I feel like is really important is the reciprocity. Did I say this right now? That if it was switched, you have to absolutely know with a very high frequency that your opponent would actually do the same, because otherwise you're just getting scammed.
Yeah, you're getting free roll. Yeah.
You give him the free roll, and that's like that was in one of my cases. It was like we're running twice. Guy like agrees like 1 second before the dealer turns like the same second or 1 second before the dealer turns over the turn, and he kind of agrees and I didn't want to give him a blanco check. I was saying like, okay, you're running twice, and then he saw the turn card or may not have seen the turn card and said like, yeah, you were too late, bro. And then he said, no, I wasn't. It's like, dude, you just agreed like. As the dealer turned over the turn, I cannot allow this to you because
that's an impossible situation, right? Like, what do you?
Yeah, because if overall
like if the turn didn't help him, would he have said the same thing? And like
exactly, like right? I mean, I know if roles were revealed, would he have allowed me to do the same? Probably not. That's like the only thing. I think he would have been free rolling me if roles were swapped. And that's why look, I'm gonna have to insist on this. This turn stands. We can do twice the river, and some people were saying this was a little bit over the top. But I realized in that moment, it was important to me that I had my image at the table because I have fairness above all. So if something unfair happens at the poker table towards me, towards someone else, I feel really strong about it. So it's just like a value that I have in my life. Fairness is just like top 3 at least.
Yeah, to go back to what you were saying, I think I've thought about it obviously a lot. My intention was just to find something that is like, like I'm like a not confrontational person. Like if you know me personally, I'm like really don't like argument or fighting or like anything like that. So I really tried to do something that's like, what's going to bring the situation down, so my intention was like, and I said this, I was like, look, I just want to do what you think, but I think I was a little bit too passive. Like if I could go back, instead of saying like, it's up to you, like what do you want to do? And like Wolf never said anything, so instead of doing that, I should have been more insistent and just said like, let's do this, and then been the one that was aggressive. And so that's something else that I learned too, is that like it was also on me, it was my mistake. So and
I like that
it was an unintentional mistake, but it was still my mistake. So I should have been like more aggressive about being like, this is what I want to do, to like make it what I think is, propose my opinion instead of leaving it up to someone else to propose it, especially with the implications of like the leveling war of like, if he says this, then maybe his hand strength is different than that. And like all those things are
you basically were
respect, but in the moment, in the pressure, I wasn't thinking about all those things. And so
you basically had
that was a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a very good takeaway, I think, from your end, because it's, again, emotion versus rational. You are totally in your rational head and saying, all right, what if he has a bluff now? Because like the Wolf had like ace 10 offsuit. Like if he had ace king, like what the fuck? Like he can just say, it's 15, it's 20, whatever. It's like a reasonable, like ace king is not even a value jam. It's like basically queens plus or kings plus or whatever. But I didn't say like the stack size exactly. But then as soon as you don't have your main bluff, which is ace king, maybe some ace queen suited, maybe ace five suited, whatever, but you have ace 10 offsuit. And it's like, okay, you kind of are inhibited in what you want to say. And obviously that was very clear that he was weak. But then what I thought was it's you were more in your rational head and trying to reason with this. But if you said it like looking from an emotional perspective, it's like, how about I take this freaking 5K chip off and then it's all good.
Yeah,
would you agree to that? And if he says, then all right, like this is all you can do. But then also I would agree that this can be turned against you again. I mean, anything that you do can be turned against you in some way.
Yeah, totally.
So, but like,
how about neither here nor there? Like, it's more about just trying to find the fair solution, and then you can't be responsible for how people think or what they interpret.
But then picking up on his emotion is like, oh, he did not know I had this much chips. It was a little bit behind it. So how about I take this one off? Would you feel good about that? And if he says, well, whatever. So, if he then says no, then it's okay. I leave it on the table and I make my decision.
And maybe you fold it, whatever. Yeah. But I think putting it out there and saying that would have been something that I wish I was more forward about and did, instead of leaving the option up to him to like say that. Like I was in the spot where if he would have said that, I would have agreed.
Yeah,
but like I said, I think I should have been more like, hey, let's try this, to not put him in the spot to have to say something. Or also because I was the one that made a mistake, I should say something that maybe makes the situation even better. And so I wish I did that.
Yeah, I mean, the ironic thing is about everything is that if you actually took the chip off, you would have had a snap call even with ace jack suited. That's the ironic thing about it all, is that actually the jam was going to be worse against a smaller stack size with his hand than against a larger stack size. But then
Yeah,
with
like
the whole situation,
he has more fold
Yeah.
equity if we leave the money on, because
Yeah.
there's more chance that I fold getting a worse price.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of levels in it, but that's really neither here nor there. Like even if he had aces or whatever,
Yeah,
like
it could have been.
it's not really here nor there. It's more just about how you can find something that is, you know, get out, like within a difficult situation, you find what is the least bad option, you know.
And then that
that's
was
what it's about.
The takeaways from what led up to that, like with people in the end, is I also wouldn't know like what people want to hear. Like I think what people want to hear emotionally is just a 30 seconds, 1 minute apology.
Yeah, I've thought about that many times.
And I think even though you might not think it's fair to do that, sometimes you have to step over that and still do that.
There was definitely some ego involved in that too, and that would have been probably a better approach too.
Yeah, I mean, I would have had a hard time as well, like apologizing for everything, because it wasn't your only fault. Like he did some stuff and whatever. But yeah, I think that's what people want to hear, even though it's not. I think the whole situation was made like really big, even though it wasn't. Like it was a minor thing. I think it was not like, yeah, the amount of money that you guys play for was like that's a problem also with the emotions again of people. To them, it seems like a lot of money. To you, yeah, it's. Well, of course, you're not going to give like money back afterwards. It's just totally ridiculous. Like if he won the hand, he would have been happy, and everyone would have celebrated, him included, whatever. But then if the emotions from people are like, oh, this is a shit ton of money, like or that other thing, like with having rebought for like $500 more, like yeah, it's like 2%. Like people do that fucking all the time, and you're not going to make a big drama of that. Even though it's wrong, it's totally wrong. It doesn't mean that you have to make an elephant out of that. It's just like, yeah, you bought in for a little bit more, and if somebody bought in for like $20 more in a $500 buying game, nobody's going to call him out on that either. And it's the same percentage. So yeah, because of the emotions, people think it's big, it's too much, it's like, yeah, whatever. But they don't understand what is happening on the rational side, just because they're so heated up. And they want to take a side. And you don't hear about all the other people who thought it was actually not that big of a deal, because you only hear the loud people.
That's also true. Yeah. It was very tough to deal with, just like being, like I said, I'm very like, try to be friends with everyone. I like to be like fit, like I don't want to say fit in, because I'm not
confrontation. Yeah, you don't want to have confront.
Insecure about expressing my thoughts or like anything like that, or just being someone that people like disagree with or whatever. But like definitely when it comes to confrontation, I don't like that at all. So like that was really hard for me. Like people very like angry and mad and like very hateful like speech and things, like calling you names and like attacking you personally and stuff. That was like very hard to deal with for me.
But what do you have to
dealt with before either? So I think I grew a lot out of that experience as well, and just learned a lot from that. So that was also a unique like growth opportunity for me too. And sometimes like the things that are, you know, the harder things to deal with in life end up strengthening you as a character more than the things that are easy with. So it's like it's one of those things that like rationally I wouldn't say like, oh, I wish this happens to me, but at the same time I'm also like always look at the things positive out of it and like look what I've like learned and how I've grown from that experience and stuff like that. So that's an interesting takeaway personally as well. But I think some of the things brought upon it, like you said, if I just like responded to the overall situation differently, I might not have brought as much of that upon myself as well. So like I think that's something I've learned as well too. Like if I just kind of took the less ego road and just said like a 30-second video, like I think I could have diminished a lot of the attacks on that sort of thing as well. So you live and learn, and it's part of life.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. And you know, as I said, like probably straight up like short apology and then just not make it, because I think a lot of people, they've become even more heated just by their own insecurities. Like when you look at the hate that is out there on your video, you have to understand where it's emotionally rooted from. And it comes from mostly own insecurities of these people. And they get triggered by certain events that came also a little bit from you, from, for example, your reaction videos. Like, for example, that reaction video where you said, yeah, you had the read on on the Wolf that he was kind of weak, and said like people were kind of provoked by that. And it comes then from their own insecurities that they create these really hateful 5-10 liners as a comment on your YouTube channel. Whereas if that might have not happened as a reaction of yours, then maybe their insecurities wouldn't have been so triggered, because you clearly have to, I think you're totally owning up to triggering those insecurities of people, because it's clearly not necessary for them to hate on you the way they do because of what happened, because of what you said. It just tells so much more about themselves than about you. But nevertheless, the fact that it does happen has to do something with you, triggering that sort of behavior.
Yeah, and I that was another thing I'm not proud of either. And so yeah, like I think, yeah, how you react to things is big. It says a lot about the situation as well. And so like I wish, you know, I could change some things about that too. But for sure, I think a lot of like stepping away from my own personal situation, like, but just in general, like covering the topic of social media. We talked about this off camera too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not related to me or this video in particular, but like just in general, like a lot of the negative comments around social media, like people bringing others down, is like just, I feel like not about the piece of content or the person, but about people that are leaving the comments. And that's, you know, social media is like, it's an immediate way to get, you know, attention about something too, you know, when you, or like to express something that, you know, you might not do in person when you're with someone, right? Like that's not, social media does not represent how, you know, human reactions actually happen. Like if you watch a TV show or you have a reaction with someone or talk to someone, it's not like representative of how interactions go on social media. But Twitter especially, it's like you see this all the time in politics, when people have like interactions or like debates on things. Like it's the conversation, I guess my problem with it is the conversation leaves kindness behind very quickly, and it goes towards like personal attacks. And instead of attacks on ideas or actions, it's attacks on like the person themselves and their character. And that's like, you know, I think it's just, those things are harsh, where it's like you see that all the time, where like there's just like name calling and like unproductive things that are happening all the time. And like I think constructive criticism is very important. I think healthy disagreement's important. I think seeking the truth is important. But I think, you know, it's like, it's a shame that like a lot of it is just like completely unproductive, off the spectrum of just negative and unproductive comments and stuff like that. And you see that a lot on social. You have, I'm sure you have this too as an influencer. Like you just see people that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly going to be on my channel. It's still mostly about like poker ability.
Yeah, for sure. But like you say something about a hand, and it's like, you're an idiot. Don't listen to this person. They don't know anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly like, yeah. Of course, it gets very like, it's about poker skill, and it gets really insulting very quickly. And
people get defensive about a lot of things too.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, it's, you know, it's just people having unfiltered thoughts, just putting them out there. And it's just like, okay, because it's Twitter. It's just unfiltered, but it's okay. Like we all have these thoughts, and then basically reassess them, because it's like, yeah, we want to be kind and have, you know, decent human being, and just, but then, you know, I've also had my periods of where I just was totally unfiltered. Like I still remember having a similar tonality. Like I actually remember there was like a pretty big moment at school. Like I was like 19 or something. And one of my teachers, history teacher, she corrected my exam totally wrong. Like she at least forgot to give me points for XYZ. Like it was massive, like 15, 20%. And I detected so many things, and I was like comparing with like other exams, and I saw like, this has to be personal. This has to be personal. No fucking way. She's not trying to, she just hates me. And I then sent her like a 2-page letter explaining everything, and also had some really personal text in there. And she then told me, and I was super surprised by it, that, yeah, she was basically hurt by what I was saying. I said, yeah, sorry, I did not mean to do that. But I was really, you know, I was like, yeah, I was so young. And it's like, okay, this has to be a personal attack. But then it just wasn't. It just was a mistake. And it was her mistake. And that's it.
That's something that separating, at least for me, go back to my experience, separating your own ego from the experiences was a growing opportunity for me as well, where it's like, if there's a great book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it's like one of the first agreements is like, don't take anything that happens in life personally. And that's like something that's like so simple, right? Like someone doesn't respond to your message, or um, anything, like something like this incident, or um, busy at the cash register and they're like not acknowledging you, whatever. Like, don't take anything personally that happens. It's just an easy thing to like understand. It's like, oh, save 20% of the money you make, right? Like, it's something that like everybody says, but it's something that's like in practice is extremely hard to do if you're honest with yourself about how people react to things. And I don't want to speak for other people, how I personally react to things when, and especially when emotions are involved, or when the stakes are high, or when you're under pressure or something like that. To not take things personally is like very, very difficult. And so that was another growth opportunity for me in this whole incident too, is just to like not take anything that happens personally. And that was challenging.
Yeah, I think also whenever the stakes are high, and back then I think it was, it was kind of threatening of a bad mark, and then it was kind of getting personal because I thought the stakes were high. So because it mattered to me, still, I kind of got offended by that a lot, and basically,
like I got like offended by this video that Doug made, but his video had nothing to do with me. Like, it wasn't like, I mean, whether it was or not a personal attack on me, I don't think it was, but like the fact that I took it personally ended up being a big cause of pain and mistake that I made. So that was something that I learned. Like, you asked me what I learned. In the end, I learned a lot of things, but sometimes covering them in different aspects here have all been rooms for growth. So like I said, it was kind of like one of those things that like I didn't, it's not like you ever want to experience something like that, but like at the same time, doing it was like, I grew a lot through it. So it's like, have you heard the parable of the Chinese farmer?
No, haven't
Okay,
heard.
it's like, I'm paraphrasing it badly. You can Google it, but it's basically like this Chinese farmer has a son, and the son, like the villagers come together, and then they announce that like they're going to war, and the son has to go to war in 3 days, and then everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so unlucky. How bad for you? Your son has to go to war." And the Chinese farmer says, "Maybe," and then the son breaks his leg 2 days later, and then doesn't have to go to war. And then everybody comes back, and then everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. Your son broke your leg." And then he doesn't have to go to war. How lucky are you? And then the Chinese farmer says, "Maybe." And then another thing happens to him. And then everybody comes back and they say all these things. And his always response is maybe. And so the point is that like, things aren't necessarily bad or good. Or if you look at them within a small, like, time frame, or like you shorten the time window, it's easy to like isolate certain things and then
or they're just both.
Yeah. And so I sort of feel like that with this experience. It's like in the moment I was like, oh, this is really bad. But then now I remember thinking about that parable, I was like, oh, maybe. And then maybe there's something I can learn from this, or maybe there's a way I can become a better version of myself, or a better person, or like anything. And so now looking back, it's like, well, maybe, like I sort of had that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I think, the polar opposites. Like, I don't think it's like not either, but it's just always both. Like, there's always like the good cannot be without the bad. It's just like these opposites only exist because of one another. I mean,
it also goes back to what you were saying before. It's like, how important is the story you're telling yourself, and how important is how you react to a situation versus a situation that actually just happens. So that's another takeaway too. So
yeah, cool. Yeah. Just a couple of wrap-up questions.
Sure.
Who do you look up to in and outside the poker world? Or, I mean, I maybe look up to is like a phrasing, but just like, who do you respect a lot in poker, or who do you still, I mean, outside of poker, I guess, look up to, or?
That's a hard question. Like, I'm, so like the first people, I guess, come to mind are like parents and like wife and like close family, like the people that I spend a lot of time with, because they all have amazing qualities in them that I try and emulate, so like everybody has their own strength, right? And I can think of different people that have different individual strengths, but like some people I think of like, oh, this person I associate with fortitude and a strong character, and this person I associate with not being judgmental and being accepting, and so like there's all these sorts of different individual qualities that I see in people. And that's sort of the way that I approach this sort of subject, is like there's not necessarily one person that fits all of the bill, because that's not how humans are. We're all imperfect, and everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. So there's certain things that I really admire in certain people. We talked about Elon Musk. I really admire his commitment to a purpose bigger than himself. But like that's what I see in him. Or like Roger Federer, I admire his commitment to greatness. Like and Steve Jobs, I admire his desire to make an impact in the world. Like he really wanted to change the world. And like when I read his biography by Walter Isaacson, it was an incredible book. I've watched probably 50 or 100 interviews on him. And that's how I get with people. I get very obsessed with them for a period of time because I try to understand deeply how they see the world and what motivated them. And then like, what are the strengths in that person that I can then, try and be inspired by in my own life. So when I think of Steve Jobs, or I see something he's done, or I look at my iPhone, I think of that and I'm like, wow, like one person can change the world. And that's incredibly inspiring to me. But like, is Steve Jobs my ultimate role model? No. I mean, he made mistakes. He neglected his daughter, for example. Like, but everybody's like that. Like everybody has maybe not those extreme polar things like some like a character like Steve, but everybody has things where like there's not everything you can admire about them, and then there's not everything that you can dislike about them. And so everybody in the world has something that you can find something that they do great.
Yeah, you only have 24 hours a day. Like everyone is just human.
Yeah, and then like everybody has something that you can learn from. And that's something that I've been trying to implement lately, and like trying to really understand, especially around people that I like so-called look up to or follow their content or like observe. It's like, what are the things that make them inspiring or great or good people or whatever it is. And then, so I try and find like qualities in everyone. So I would say like I have things in a lot of different people, and that's kind of representative of like how I am as a person. Like I have different aspects of different people that I'm like pick off the shelf, and then I'm kind of like a gecko, and I just try to make my own little thing. But yeah, that's kind of how I approach it. So I get obsessed with, like, not obsessed, but I get like immersed in a character for a little period of time, and then I kind of really feel like I deeply understand them, and then I kind of like move on to someone else.
Sure. I mean, that's a good answer. And what would you tell your younger self, like 10 years ago, like or 15 exactly?
It's a great question. I would tell myself a lot of things. It depends on like what aspect. So like there are certain situations where like maybe I was in one situation where I'd be like, don't jump in that big game. Or for sure, like the most
maybe ego related.
How about this? The most practical advice I would tell myself. I'll try and go about this a few ways. The most practical advice I would tell myself is save more money and be more conservative. And like that's something that I think I did really well starting when I met my wife when I was like 25, but I started making a lot of money when I was 18. And I think that like overall arch is like one of the biggest perspectives I try to instill on young people, is just the value of compounded interest, and like how if you start saving at 18 and someone starts saving at 40 and you're both 65 and the person that is 40 saves like 4 times as much, you'll be like better off because you started earlier. And like that whole idea of compounded interest, it was Einstein's favorite thing, was just not something that I like completely respected as someone that was young, because I felt invincible and on top of the world. And I made, $1 million when I was 18. I'm like, I want to make 10 million. I don't care. But like, if I could go back, that would be like the most practical advice I would tell myself. And not because I made a lot of money at a young age, but because no matter how much money you make at a young age, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much money you save. And giving yourself options when you're older is like one of the most, I think, important things in life, because there's going to be a period where you might change your mind or want to do something different or have more responsibilities. And if you start at 18, when you start making money, and when you're 35, then you have, a family and kids and you want to move and do something else. If you commit to 17 years of disciplined financials, you can really put yourself in a spot to do anything you want in life. And so that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I try to impart on younger people. There's a great resource about this called Mr. Money Mustache, about this guy that's like retired at 35, making like, I don't want to say like a completely normal salary, like a decent salary, but like a salary that you would think like there's no way he can retire till 60, you know, like a standard American salary, like basically retired in like 15 years or something like that, through just being smarter about money. And so now I treat it a lot like a game, and I try and be efficient with money. And so I have like a lot bigger of a respect for it. I feel like in poker, something that's easy to lose, especially my personal journey of going on $1 million upswing, $1 million downswing at 18 or 19 or 20, it was like complete insensitivity towards caring about large sums of money that were relatively small, right? Like $500 or $1,000 is like, who cares? You know, it's like nothing in the face of the mountain I just punted away. But now it's more about like the individual value of an item. So for example, if an avocado costs $4, I'm like, okay, that's not a good ROI because it should cost $2. So it's like more about individualizing certain things and like compartmentalizing and then treating each thing like a way to be the most efficient, and treating money like a game. That really has helped me like just be really, really efficient with my life. And that's like a very rewarding feeling, to know that I'm like channeling money towards things that are meaningful, and like even you can save all that money and give it to charity. You know, and so that's like, you know, really meaningful, as opposed to just punting it on things that are hedonistic and not useful. So that's like probably like the practical advice I'd give myself. There's a lot of other advices I'd give myself. Obviously, like be more patient. Yeah, don't take things personal, like even at a very young age. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I try to think of something practical that other people can sort of hopefully draw from, rather than just something that's like my own personal journey.
Okay,
it's a good question. How about you? What would you say?
Well, to just be more, I mean, to have more courage to do what you think you can do. Just believe in yourself more. I was way too, like, I don't necessarily regret going into teaching, because I still love teaching. I think it's a part of me. I would have done it regardless of studying or not, in some way. So it's always going to help me in some way. But I just didn't think that the studies were as helpful. Like some moments of it, but unfortunately very brief moments or weeks from the 4.5 years were like helpful so much that I'm glad I did it. But then a lot of the 4.5 years was a lot of wasted time as well. And somehow I wish I could have managed to use that time better for my own goals, instead of focusing on what would be nice, right?
Yeah.
It would be nice to be a teacher and have like a good, good profession that, helps people out there, make a decent salary. You just have this and this and this, and, everything would have been just on a nice path. But to just have the same mindset that I had like years later, a little bit earlier, and just have
that's a really good answer. That's a really good answer.
But I thought also about this question quite a bit, because I've asked multiple
this
people.
Is really good.
So,
yeah, I really like your approach to these. Your podcast is very good. Your questions and your discussion topics are very good.
Yeah, thanks.
For sure.
Where can people find you? Just that you can do a little bit of advertising, and just dropping a little bit into what you do on Conscious Poker.
Can I go? Thank you.
Okay,
thank you for first of all for the opportunity to share what I'm doing. But can I touch on one thing that I'd like to share about my younger self?
Sure.
I was lucky, that from a very young age, as young as I can remember, my mom like really instilled in me that it's really important to just be who you are, and like be unapologetic for that, and just kind of like not care about what other people think. And I actually remember she told me to read this little, I still have it, not here, but my home in California, this little plaque. And it says like this little phrase that I had to read every day. And it was like, I am the only unique me that will ever be. I have the power to make a difference in this world. I understand that like I'm unique and no one else is like me. And like, that's okay to be like that. So I read this thing every day before bed. It was actually put in front of my bed. And that really gave me like confidence at a young age to be like, like to pursue things that other people thought weren't cool. So like I dropped out of football. I remember this one day I was in football where there was like and there was like a bunch of people on the team, and I had to leave practice early, like on a Monday, to go take a voice lesson because I was in musical theater. And this was like, I'm 14, I'm in like Southern California playing football, and I have to like tell the coach in front of the team that I'm like leaving to go do this other thing that's like clearly not going to be received well when you're a 14-year-old guy around. Anyway, but my mom, like, this was a hand that was completely dealt to me, right? This was just like my mom instilled this in me, so I'm like extremely grateful for that. But there were times when I had that like sort of courage or that sort of like fortitude to just be like completely myself. But then there were other times where like I remember distinctly that like I knew something was something that I wanted or I felt like was an expression of who I was or how I wanted to be as a person, but that I didn't have the courage to act on it. Like, for example, like telling a girl, like I still remember telling a girl that you like liked her, and that just being like really direct with like a girl at like 16 and telling her that like instead of beating around the bush and saying all these things, just being like, I actually think you're a beautiful person and I'd like to spend time with you. Like just saying that to someone at a young age would have been really cool.
It would have been helpful to probably all of us. Like, this is just something that I think you're just naturally good at.
Yeah. And just being more like direct and honest with people, like in that sort of way in a young age, like that'd be something that I would say. Like that's the one thing I regret the most, is just like probably not regret, that's the wrong word, but just like wasn't advanced enough in my development that I would tell myself to just be more like that moment where I had like that one moment that I reflect on and I'm really proud that I did that. But then I have hundreds of other moments that are counteract that I could have taken a different line, so to speak. And I wish I would have, it would have been cool to go back and like say the things I would say now,
and see what happens. But the cool thing is you can always, like, I like this about the reunions. You can always just say, yeah, I mean, to get into the, like, always ask, like, especially once you get older, I think people become more honest in that sense. You can say, ask, like, yeah, what do you think back then? I like that about the reunions. Like, a lot of, we have classmates, like, what do you think of me back then, really? Like, you have some people you have fallouts with, really, you hated each other at school somehow, right? And then you said, like, yeah, what was really that bad? And then you get so surprised by that. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a big thing. You kind of there was a little bit of rivalry, and you just were in each other's ways for different reasons, for popularity. Popularity is like big time in school, right? Like how popular you are, so important to others. Like it actually wasn't that important to me. And for me, that was always a bit of thing that I always projected a lot in my life over the last 30 years. Like I thought that, like, yeah, because I'm that way, I expected the other person to be similar. We all do that. And for that reason, I thought that it wasn't going to be as important for others and therefore behave differently. And but it was so important to them. Like it was still somewhat important, but not as much as for others. So yeah, it just behaved differently because of what you expect. You project a lot.
Totally. And like I remember just like it leads to like making decisions that you weren't otherwise make. Like I remember going out and partying in nightclubs in my early 20s because I lived in Vegas and did well in poker and I could afford it. And I was like, this is what you're supposed to do. But I actually didn't really like it. But then it was like so cool to do. And like you're around these other people and like you feel good around like hanging out with these people and great people that I was hanging around too in a lot of ways. But it's just like it wasn't really me. And so like I wish I just kind of was more like all in on who I am as a person at a younger age. Whereas now I feel like I'm slowly, progressively, hopefully, you get more like that. I heard a great quote though. We'll kind of wrap this up. Is by Paul Orfilia he started Kinko's, and he says, in your 20s you care a lot about what people think, and your 40s you care a little less about what people think, and your 60s you realize they weren't thinking about you in the first place. And that was a great quote that really stuck with me. That was like, man, like so much of your actions are like, not you, I don't want to put this out on anyone, but for me, like, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to this, so much of your actions are based on like dictated by the opinion of someone else, whether it's your parents or your family or girlfriend or like just people that you don't know on social media, right? Like posting pictures to look cool, to like get likes from someone. If you just think about like the psychology behind a lot of action, it's like so much of it is based on that idea of having an opinion from someone else. And like the least that I could do that in my younger life would have been probably the best advice I could have given myself from a personal development standpoint. So
also made there's so many articles on that as well. Also this inner mammoth, I think, on Wait But Why or something. I read some article there. It's really good. It explains you how much more often you think that other people are actually thinking something about you, but they don't. And as you said, with
they're
the same
thinking about themselves, right? Or they're thinking about their own
mostly
problems or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's really funny. So where can people find you?
It depends on what you're looking for. So I'm very active on like all social medias. I guess the best place to follow me probably is Instagram, because I have like a little mini blog where I share like thoughts or things I learn. I share poker content too, like things I learned in poker, or poker advice or strategy or hand reviews and stuff like that through Instagram. I'm at Alec Torelli everywhere, so you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Obviously YouTube, but you're probably already here. So, and then if you want like poker strategy and content, like you actually want to improve your poker game, follow at Conscious Poker or consciouspodker.com. And we have like, free blogs and videos and content. You can enter your email and download like a lot of free useful content that we've created to help people improve at poker. And we have, a membership program that's a monthly program where there's like group coaching with me. There's like a private community on Facebook where people can have questions, and me and another coach are responding every day. There's new videos every week. There's courses in there. There's 80 or 90 videos growing every week in the membership. So there's like, access to that if you actually want to improve at poker strategy. So it really depends on what you're after. But, if you're watching this and you enjoyed this, or if you didn't enjoy it, whatever, if you want to say hi, come say, hey, at Alec Torelli on social. Just send me a message. I read all my messages. I read all my email. I'm very active on social. So I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for your attention.
Yeah, thanks a lot to you, Alec, for being here on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
and if you listen to this podcast afterwards, it will be on iTunes as well. Don't forget also to leave I'm talking to you guys out there, to leave a review of it, give me some 5 stars on iTunes, because that
definitely
would
give them 5 stars. This is cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And also don't forget to like here on YouTube, subscribe, and let other people know if you enjoy this content, and send some links out there and promote this Poker Player podcast. And let me know, guys, what you thought of it. And let me know who you would like to see next.
Yeah, how about also what you would tell your younger self 10 years below? Maybe leave that in a comment.
That would be a good call to action.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. I'd love to hear what people say about themselves too, because I'll learn something too.